You served as director of the Tech Policy Center with research focusing on big tech, emerging technology policy. What's so fascinating is your prior role at Facebook as well, Facebook's Global Security Counterterrorism Analysis Program. You helped create it. You led it. Give us the sense of what ultimately the social media platforms are doing right now to respond to the weekend.
Well, it's a far cry from what I used to do starting in 2016, where we were essentially building an airplane in mid-flight. So what happens in a situation like this? I was specifically devoted to foreign Islamist terrorism. So it was a very different animal. But at the same time, what all of these teams are working together within companies are doing, they're working with their community operations teams. They're working with their engineers, usually the trust and safety engineers. They're working with their policy teams. They're working with people in global security, like the team that I led, and they're trying to identify if the attacker was on the platform, if he has active accounts, if he was ever on the platform, if he posted anything. They're trying to potentially take down some of that information so the public can't necessarily see it, and instigate copycat attacks and whatnot. But ultimately, they are trying to identify the perpetrator in the minutes after those attacks that happen and get them off the platform. The whole MO of these teams is to make the platform hostile to these types of actors, and that's what they're going to be doing in the moments after an attack breaks on the news like this.
Kara, good morning, and thank you for coming on Bloomberg Technology. I'd like to just focus on what happened the last 48 hours, the social media discussion immediately following the attack on former President Trump, but also the sort of continued sharing of content. And one thing that I notice or I reflect on is how many people discussing the platform X and how they were pleased, basically, to be able to get information so quickly. But as Davies just pointed out in her reporting, within the stuff shared on X, much of it was misinformation. It was false. How do you balance speed of access to information to the check that you have to get it right?
It is a very, very difficult question. And my best advice, having been a counterterrorism analyst for the Department of Defense for 6 years, and then having worked in counterterrorism at the platform level at a big tech company, is to wait, to be very prudent about, number one, even identifying the attacker. We knew in the couple minutes after this, there were different pictures of who it could have potentially been floating around on social media. They were wrong. There are other pictures. They were wrong. So I think the act of prudence in this case is to wait, to try to get the full picture. And you know what's really interesting too is there is a cohort of open source analysts who are digging through a lot of these information. They're working many times on their own. They're not necessarily employed by these big tech companies. They're not even vendors or contracted out, but they're digging through a lot of the information. They're putting the pieces together. But my advice to everyone, just people that are looking at voyeurs, just wait. The full story eventually comes out. But in terms of weighting the scales in either way, I think big tech platforms have to do a much better job of showing that they're more neutral arbiters of information. Because as the Bloomberg reporter said prior to this, you know, tech has been under a microscope because they haven't gotten so many of the calls right. Look at the Hunter Biden laptop story when Twitter was breaking the links to the DMs for that legitimate story in the 2020 campaign. So big tech has a lot of making up to do when it comes to this. They don't have the trust of the people, and I would say rightly so.
It was interesting that ahead of all of this, Meta did indeed, as it had said it would do, lift all restrictions on Trump's accounts ahead of the US election. It was understood, Kara. And I'm interested as we do try and gain trust, it's also at a time where we've got artificial intelligence and technology working against us in terms of really understanding the true nature of things. How much is that making life ever more difficult?
I think it's exacerbating it to the nth degree. I mean, you look at AI, and I'm a big fan of AI. I'm a big fan and pro-innovation when it comes to open sourcing these models and these AI tools. I think that's going to take us farther than our foreign adversary counterparts who are working on more closed models of these large language models, et cetera, et cetera. So I am a big fan of AI. I want to get that out front. But as we say in the tech community, if you build it, they will come. Bad actors are always going to co-opt technology that outpaces attempts to govern it. This technology is developing even more rapidly than I even foresaw when I was working with it in 2017 and then researching it in 2018. Now we were talking of an AI winter back then, another AI winter. And yet with the explosion of GPT-4, now called ChatGPT, I mean, it looks like these technologies, because they can tailor information, amplify information, and do all of this at machine speed and scale. That's the kicker, machine speed and scale. We are going to see a world of synthetic media where the truth is going to be harder and harder to discern. And that puts a lot of onus on the platform to get it right at the outset.
Cara, we have a question from one of our audience members, which is how much of Project 2025 will actually make it into the GOP platform? But let's answer that in the lens of technology, please.
Yeah, so we don't know what's in Trump's mind or Trump's campaign's mind, but we do know what the platform has said. The platform is pro-crypto, the platform is pro-AI development, and the platform is pro-space. So I think when it comes to what the Trump campaign and potential Trump presidency, second Trump presidency is going to do, I don't speak for them, but it looks like they're trying to paint an affirmative agenda, an affirmative vision of the things that they are for when it comes to technology, rather than the things that they are against. So I would expect a lot of pro-innovation to take place under a potential second Trump presidency.